Bienvenidos a Vox Terra. So today I want to share with you a couple of just headlines coming from CBS NewsHour nightly news on December 12 and December 13, just because we can look at this as we can look at almost any media and just see how it's emphasizing, or what it's underemphasizing, that really defend established business interests or defend business as usual. Now, I didn't invent this kind of critique. I got this way of critiquing it from an author called Noam Chomsky, by the way. And really what I'm mostly concerned about here is climate change, primarily, because that's really coming down like a ton of bricks, only the media is definitely not doing a good job of warning you about that. So one form of climate denial is what I'm going to call de-emphasization or de-emphasizing. So when we watch CBS News, they're not going to be maybe like Fox or One America or maybe Newsmax would be with arg barg, this isn't real. They're just going to de-emphasize really important parts to this story that through de-emphasis will actually lead people towards a more, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say right-wing direction. Now, again, it depends how we define the variable right-wing, but here I'm defining it as you're really standing up for business as usual while having this conservative veneer added on. And that gets me to another point when people say the left-wing media. Okay, I would agree there's some truth to saying there's a liberal media that really leaves out a lot of more traditionalist or conservative voices when it comes to certain social issues about family formation and that kind of thing. But amigos, there's no leftist big media because that's a contradiction. Meaning the true left, if you're talking about people like Karl Marx, you're criticizing capitalism. You're saying we got this system dominated by these big industries, by these big businesses. They dominate our media, our politics, et cetera, et cetera. That's the true left. And there's no media really doing that, really criticizing that. So let's get back to the CBS news articles I want to tell you about. So one, you got this massive snowstorm, these blizzards blanketing the U.S., along with, quote, rare December tornadoes and tornadoes hitting the South. Some of these tornadoes, they're deadly in Louisiana. People lost their lives in Louisiana. Now, this is with any of these extreme weather events. Going back my whole lifetime, the media just could connect them back to climate change, but they don't. And it's not really hard to do that. So you might say initially, okay, well, how would tornadoes in the South and rare freak snowstorms? Well, okay, here's how, right? The whole planet's heating up, set in motion by fossil fuels that basically right at NASA ignored. One consequence of that is the jet stream, the Gulf Stream, these oceanic and atmospheric currents are threatened, appear to be weakening and sluggish and out of whack. Why? Because these currents operate on those differentials from cold pole to warm equator, circulation. Well, as that Arctic's heating up faster than the rest of the planet due to those feedback loops I told you about, you're losing those differentials, and now this cold Arctic air can just go slumping far down places like where it didn't particularly used to do that. You remember the Texas snowstorm of last year. Contrarily, just warm tropical airs can just push up further north. Think about these heat waves hitting Seattle. Wildfires there now. And then tornadoes and thunderstorms, also part of this severe winter event, are also climate related or heat related. There's an article I shared with you before how Tornado Alley has been shifting eastward with the heating planet, just ignored. And then the accompanying floods along with all this and the extreme moisture, the extreme precipitation, well, that also is related to the heating planet because those warmer bodies of atmosphere hold on to more moisture more greedily and then just dump it down heavier. Well, all these simple facts ignored, and they don't bother to get on a climate scientist when they talk about these extreme weather events, lulling you into this sense of false normalcy. And what's worse, I showed you in another video before, NOAA, the way they calculate what's normal weather is based on 30-year time frames. So every 30 years, the game keeps getting changed. And remember, due to these things called feedback loops, well, the whole thing is cascading. Okay, next news headline they talked about was the massive oil spill, and I believe it was the Keystone pipeline. And their headline was, how's that going to affect gas prices? And that's what they talked about. They didn't explain how the environmental movements have been battling against these pipelines, as has the Native American movements, in Keystone XL in particular, because they don't want to keep committing to fossil fuel infrastructure, and because these pipelines can leak and contaminate the water systems. And there's all kinds of other toxicity largely ignored with the extraction and processing of fossil fuel petrochemicals. So that's left out. And the headline, which you're concerned now about, is just, oh, well, gas prices are going to go up. But again, without even questioning, why are so many Americans driving these massive gas guzzlers now at a time when we should be waking up to conserve? In the past, we were driving much smaller vehicles. And when they talk about rising prices, well, climate change should be a big part of the story there too, because we're seeing a lot of crop failures due to this destabilizing climate, these heat waves killing crops, the floods killing crops, the whole unpredictability of growing crops now. Then in the next headline, a big breakthrough in nuclear fusion and how that could be the answer to our clean energy needs, end quote. Well, okay, so one problem with that, and maybe it will come to pass, but I want to point out in that episode, I believe the host said it's maybe 3 years away. Well, I remember when I was a kid, I told you I could go to libraries and there'd still be books from the 1950s in the libraries. And then I'd see books, saying nuclear fusion, 10 years away. Then, I'm not a kid in the 50s, but I'd see them. I'd see books in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and it was always nuclear fusion, 10 years away, nuclear fusion, 10 years away. So they hype nuclear fusion, which I assume has some tie-ins with the nuclear power industry, but ignore what I've shown you in other videos, that there's these studies out there done like Stanford, and a lot of brain power went into them, saying here's how we could get to 100% renewable energy economy based on solar, wind, responsible hydro, geothermal. Okay, they've been there for years and years and years, ignored by the media, ignored by the politicians, because again, I have to believe the fossil fuel industry, their more reckless elements within them are just so influential. So we're ignoring climate change connection to extreme weather, promoting some hope that may or may not happen. And what if that hope of nuclear fusion does come true someday? Well, what about the fact that we talk about our power needs? Well, it looks to me like this society is completely frenetic, 24/7, just won't stop, can't stop. And it doesn't look to me like people are really enjoying this constant freneticism. I'm seeing all kinds of aggressive driving on the road, hearing reports about suicide, depression, all this stuff on the rise. So you're going to get nuclear fusion and just never stop the party here? But it may not happen. And meanwhile, you're just, hey, don't worry. Don't worry, you don't really need to have a Green New Deal because nuclear fusion's coming. Another way to kind of quiet people down. Now, in the December 13 show, they talked about the crisis at the border. And, when these talks about the crisis at the southern border and all the migrants coming in, again, that leaves out the climate change drivers of this and how the extreme weather, the droughts, the heat they're having in parts of Latin America. And it also leaves out a lot of our country's underreported, undertaught history of involvement in that region that's not really told to us about or not emphasized as a negative influence. I mean, just take El Salvador as a case study. We have these deep ties there. I can remember going back to the 80s, supporting, a really brutal government in the name of stopping a communist insurrection. We won, killed them, they're done. A lot of people got a lot of human rights abuses in that process. And now El Salvador is left with this crime-ridden, dangerous place. That was the fruits of that victory. Well, it isn't spun that way. So instead, people just see, oh, well, all these migrants coming here, we can't help everybody, that kind of thing. But they're not seeing, well, how was this situation created by some of these reckless elements within our business community and our media ignoring it, giving them a pass. Now, if they did see that, then I believe here's what would happen. You'd have a serious transition away from fossil fuels happening. You'd have a serious transition towards more conservation, reduce, reuse, recycle, wilderness set aside. And I think when it came to immigration, you'd have a much more compassionate, doesn't mean you need an open border, because that doesn't sound to me like that would work very well either, but you have a more compassionate, reasoned approach to this, acknowledging some of our role in creating this situation. And you know what? This isn't necessarily just like left-wing me talking here. This is also the biblically influenced, more traditionalist me talking here, because I got this right from the Bible. Look at the mote in thine own eye and welcome the stranger. That's right from the Bible, amigo. Well, I hope you found this critique of the so-called mainstream media helpful. And again, you don't need to go to conspiracy, outlandish places. I advise against that. You just want to look for what's being underemphasized. And you want to go to reliable information sources to do that, like NASA, like NOAA, Amnesty International. You want to see what the labor movement is advocating. You want to see what the environmental movement is advocating, like Sierra Club, Natural Resources Defense Council. Okay, are we cool here? I hope you found this interesting, helpful. Please make sure you're subscribed. You click the notification bell so you know when I'm putting up a new video. You're donating at Patreon. Like I say, most of these videos, I put in hours and hours of research, tons of prep time, and the only one really making money here is YouTube. So thank you to my two patrons, Belle Legrissi and Environmental Coffee House. And as always, until next time, peace be with you.